Moving to Syria now, where the country's interim leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has called for peace and national unity after days of clashes between security forces and loyalists of the former regime of Bashar al-Assad. Hundreds of people from Syria's Alawite religious minority and Syrian security forces have been killed in coastal areas of western Syria. According to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, more than 1,000 people have died in the clashes. The interim government has deployed heavy security in the coastal towns. Let's take a closer look now with Middle East expert Bente Scheller of the Heinrich Böll Foundation. Great to have you on DW News today. How concerned are you of the situation in Western Syria escalating even further?
Well, in all Syria, it is a very fragile situation where acts of violence might easily spiral into a bigger bloodshed. So, of course, what we have been witnessing over the past days in the coastal areas gives a reason to concern. And I think for those who are involved, fear on the ground is really high. So we should be dedicated all to see how we can curb the violence.
Just to remind our viewers, the Assad family that ruled Syria are minority Alawites. Are Alawites now becoming scapegoats for the atrocities committed by the Assad regime?
What we've been seeing in the past decade and a half is that a minority of the Alawites were privileged only. Most of the Alawites were coerced into supporting the regime, and Alawites really sacrificed a lot. They were used as cannon fodder by the regime and scared into submission. So I think Alawites have been suffering over the conflict, but we also have to see that many of them were involved in militias, the so-called Shabiha, who committed atrocities and massacres mainly against Sunni villages in the coastal area and in the Homs area. So I think there is both a history of suffering at the hands of Alawites, particularly in this region, but of course now to see many civilians killed who belong to the Alawite sect and who were not involved in any atrocities also is really tragic. And therefore also I think there should be an understanding that everybody pertaining to that sect has been part of the former regime or its massacres.
How much control does the current government, this new government, actually have over the country?
HTS always seems big because they were the ones to lead the offensive towards Damascus, but it is clear that they don't have the capacities and the personnel to control the entire territory. I think also the integration of militias into the army that HTS has been announcing and that it has been working on is incomplete. So now when violence started, and it started by attacks of former regime elements on security forces of the new government, when this started, there were calls all over the country on social media. So we see also that some militias just went there and started fighting. Therefore, I think a number of the human rights violations that have been seen here committed by all armed factions to this conflict have been carried out at the hands of militias that are not yet under the control of the government.
All right, well, what needs to be done to ensure political stability in Syria?
I think now it is absolutely essential to have a documentation of what exactly happened, to understand who was involved in the fighting, but also who was involved in former atrocities. Only if we have justice for all the atrocities committed under the Assad regime, we will have stability, because justice is not a luxury. Justice is a remedy against revenge. And I think revenge killings involve always those who were not involved in violence before, which would be a guarantee for further escalation. So we should support justice efforts, documentation efforts, and really also not spread information that might not be verified. All this might be contributing to further violence.
Great to have your insights, Bente. Middle East expert Bente Scheller of the Heinrich Böll Foundation. Thank you.
You're welcome.